Diabetes Connections is brought to you by One Touch. Every touch is a step forward. By Dexcom. Take control of your diabetes and live life to the fullest with Dexcom. And by Real Good Foods. Real food you feel good about eating.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
This week, a frank discussion about the diabetes community and inclusion, about race and diversity. Actress and model Anita Nicole Brown says people of color are being left behind.
Type 1 diabetes does not discriminate. They don't care who gets diagnosed with this disease or not. So why are we not as equally represented and as equally seen as everyone else? Because we're going through the same battles you guys are going through.
We talk about how to get more voices in the community and better representation at conferences and in leadership. We also talk about working on movie and TV sets and getting booked for acting jobs with Type 1. And tell me something good, a bunch of ride and walk milestones to share. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Welcome to another week of Diabetes Connections. I am your host, Stacey Sims. We aim to educate and inspire about type 1 diabetes by sharing stories of connection. And recently, I went to a completely different type of conference talking about connection. Oh my gosh. It was not diabetes. It was the first ever women's podcasting conference. It was just unbelievable for me. It was wonderful. If you follow me on social media, you know I shared a bit about this. And if you're not in the Facebook group, jump on in. It is Diabetes Connections, the group. I also shared on Instagram, and I think after this conference, I may finally be ready to try some more Instagram live and live stories and all that stuff, really intimidates me, but I got to do it. You see, I had started following this group, and there is a podcast called She Podcasts, and there is a Facebook group, and I had started following along really right around the same time that I launched this show in the summer of 2015. And they had just gotten off the ground shortly before that as well. And while many of you may be thinking, the podcast community, first of all, you guys have conferences. Yeah, there are a lot of podcasting conferences. I don't usually go because I'd much prefer to go to diabetes conferences. And my travel time is kind of limited, as you can imagine. But I really wanted to go to this one because I'm telling you, look, guys, I love you. But when you talk about podcasting, and this has been my experience really in my entire broadcast career, when you talk about questions in podcasting or questions for equipment or, that sort of thing, a lot of times you get shouted down in these Facebook groups. And I know that a lot of women have had this experience in whatever career they're in. And it really is just an incredibly supportive community, the women podcasting community. I knew I had to go. I jumped right in when they were announcing it. Many of you who have listened really since the beginning or really a part of the diabetes online community or have been a part for a long time, Christopher Snyder is the one who pushed me into podcasting. So of course, not all guys are going to shout you down or mansplain to you about podcasting. Chris was a great example of somebody who extended the time and really helped me out. He now works for Tide Pool. He had a very long running podcast for many years, many episodes, just talking. And Chris, I really don't think that we would have this show without his help at the beginning. But man, to be with all those women, to hear all those stories, get all the support was remarkable. And it was just what I needed to kind of re-energize. I have been focusing on the book quite a bit. Of course, we've been doing the show, but I have a lot of great ideas. I have a really good barometer of where we are. We're doing great. Oh my gosh. The audience we have, the engagement we have, it kind of checked all the markers for me. Like, I do this by myself. I have a wonderful editor, but I don't have a whole team. I'm not NPR. I don't have a lot of audience surveys. I do this in my bonus room in my house, me and my microphone, and you, right? You're here. So it's a wonderful relationship, but it can be a little strange to know where we stack up. And the short answer is we're doing great. So more to come on that. I do have some other ideas about podcasting in general, not just about diabetes, and about how I might be able to help other people like Chris helped me. So, just kind of file that one away in the back of your mind, especially if you're thinking about starting a podcast. It's a lot like when we used to talk about blogs and continue to do so, because someone does need to hear what you have to say. And maybe a weekly podcast for more than 4 years like I'm doing is not for you. That's fine. But a podcast, a limited run or 1 or 2 episodes or trying it out might be something to think about. All right, back on track. Daydreaming away here. Diabetes Connections is brought to you by OneTouch. OneTouch has been a trusted brand in blood glucose management for more than 30 years. This past year, Pharmacy Times and U.S. News and World Report named OneTouch as a #1 pharmacist-recommended brand in blood glucose monitoring devices based on a survey of pharmacists nationwide. Find out more about OneTouch brand products at diabetes-connections.com and click on the OneTouch logo. My guest this week is actress and model Anita Nicole Brown. Diagnosed her senior year of high school, she sunk into a deep depression. She'll talk about that. Now, she wants to be the person she didn't have back then, the very visible person with diabetes on TV and in movies. She also wants to see more people of color in the diabetes community, in leadership and speaking roles. Her Instagram posts on that subject are why I initially asked her to come on the show. Look, this is a tough conversation to have, and I admit I probably sound like the white suburban minivan driving mom that I am. I tend to live in a bit of a bubble. You know that. But we have to be willing to have these conversations to make any progress. So here's my talk with Anita Nicole Brown. Anita, thank you very much for joining me. I'm really interested to talk to you, and I'm so glad you took the time to come on the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting me. I was happy to do it.
Well, this started because of a very, I don't know if we can call it a conversation, but a very brief conversation that you and I had on Instagram after you put a post up about the lack of presence of people of color in the diabetes community, specifically in the type 1 diabetes community. And I want to talk to you about you and your story and much more. But let's just jump in and start right there. What led you? Do you remember, was it something specific that led you to put that post out on that day?
I don't know if it was anything in particular. It's something I've noticed over the course of years. I mean, my diabetes will be drinking age in November. So, we got to go and get her drunk and everything. But I was sitting up here and I just remember not seeing anything, you said you're a mom and your son has type 1. And I remember I'm the only one in my family with this disease. Of course, my mom, she had no one to turn to. Typically as a child, the first person you look up to are your parents. But when I started going through all of this, I'm trying to see people like me, okay, there's got to be someone else that knows about this crap, someone that I can see and look to that can show me, hey, you may be going through this, but hey, so did I, So I started trying to find that. And initially, it wasn't noticed. Type 1 is just, I don't know why, but it's the invisible aspect of diabetes in and of itself. And you see type 2 commercials and everything and all of that crap all day, but you don't see type 1. So I remember when I decided to get into acting, I was like, okay, no, I'm going to change this because I don't appreciate the fact that we're hidden, we're a minority within the disease itself. So it's come on, you got to be kidding me. And as I kept doing it and everything, and I kept putting my diabetes out there front and center and everything and all of that, then I started noticing, where are the other people of color? How come I don't see them? And I did a lot of work for JDRF and things like that. And I had quite a few people ask, people within not just the volunteer, but different aspects of it, asked me if I would speak because they followed either the videos that me and Danielle do and things like that. They've been on my Instagram page and everything, my Facebook page, and they were just like, oh my God, we would just love for you to be able to speak. And so I said, well, let me know who I should talk to so that way I can, because I don't mind. And it was every single time they sent me to that person, it was a roadblock. Well, we got everybody we need, so thank you. Okay. So I was just all right, my bad. And then I'm going to these events and I'm looking and I'm there's not a single person up there that looks like me. Not one.
Let me back up just a little bit because you mentioned your diabetes is drinking age. So I assume you were diagnosed 21 years ago.
In November, she'll be 21.
All right. So a very different time in terms of being able to find anybody with type 1 anyway. Yes. I mean, forget before social media.
Yep.
21 years ago, we're talking a completely different landscape in terms of connecting. Do you remember how you first started connecting at all? Was it at that time, or did it take you many years after?
It took many years after. It took many years after. Like, I tell people all the time, like, the diabetes online community, like, it did not exist when I was going through everything. Like, there was no such thing as this. So me seeing the diabetes online community, I'm like, oh, wow, finally. Like, I wonder if I would be completely different had this existed when I was just diagnosed and trying to deal with this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, because I didn't have it. So it was me trying to figure this disease out. There wasn't, like I said, there's nothing that I was able to look at on TV or anything and stuff like that. Like, there was nothing. So for me, it was just, one, I had to get used to having this disease that apparently, I'm not saying no one cares about, but it's not as big as type 2 diabetes. So, you know.
Yep.
And then I had to figure out, like, I was in my senior year of high school, and this is when you're supposed to be going to college and things like that and thinking about that. And here I am. I just got diagnosed with the disease. Then I got hit with diabetic nerve damage in my legs and feet. I lost the ability to walk for almost a year. So I'm like totally thrown off track with what life was supposed to be about, you know? And I was just like, this sucks. I hate this. Like, my life should not be like this. I was the good child. You know, I was National Honor Society from grade school all the way through high school and even into college, you know? So it was just like, what did I do wrong? I was active, you know, did tennis, did badminton, did gymnastics, did swimming, did bicycling. Like, I was, you know, it was like, why did I get this? What did I to deserve this? And so I didn't have anyone to talk to about it. I didn't see anyone saying, yes, this is what I went through. This is hard, but you can ... You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I experienced that. Like, you know how they say those who can't do? In my instance, it was just like, well, I don't see this, and I didn't see this growing up. I want to show them that it is possible. In spite of all the crap that I went through, you can still overcome. Don't succumb to the disease, which, trust me, I've almost done, but I did.
Well, and that was my question, was how do you get from that young woman with such a challenge, who doesn't have the role models, who isn't seeing anybody like them, to being the person you are? And I only see you on Instagram. So the person on Instagram who is posting beautiful but very revealing pictures of, here's my Omnipod, here's my gear, I'm in a bra, I may be naked in one of these pictures, but artfully posed. You know, I wish I were as fearless as you, with or without diabetes. How do you get there from where you've been?
I want to say it happened in two parts. So the first part I want to say it was like shortly after I'd gotten married. And it was still, you know, I was still dealing with issues with jobs and stuff, you know, like, okay, so I encountered a hypo or a hyper, couldn't go to work. So now my job was on the line and things like that. You know, I encountered miscarriages because of the complications of being diagnosed so late with the disease. And I actually took it upon myself to, like, end my life. And that day, I remember I was sitting in my room. My husband was a cop, so he worked nights, and I, like, intentionally waited until he went to work. And I sat there, and I remember telling God, I was like, I can't do this. I know you say you don't give us anything that we can't handle, but you made a mistake with me. And I put everything into play. And I remember something told me, but I remember I looked up right as I laid down, and I said, you know what, if I wake up tomorrow morning, I'll know I have a purpose for being here, and I'll never do this again. But I had already set everything into motion. And then I remember waking up the next morning, and, like, my vision was all cloudy and everything. And I was like, oh my God, I made it to heaven. You know, it was like so bright and sunny in my room. It looked like I had clouds in there with me. And I was like, oh my God, I did it. And then I'm looking around and I'm like, wait, why is my bed in heaven? Are you serious? And I'm just like, there's no way I should have recovered. Like, there was no way. And I remember I woke up and I sat on the edge of the bed and I looked up and I said, all right, God, point made. I was like, I'll never do this again, and I'll try and find what my purpose is for being.
Gosh, wow.
And that was what changed it. Like, he was just like, oh no, Anita, you ain't going nowhere. Oh, no, we got some things for you to do. And he was like, no. And that was when I was like, okay, point made. All right, let's figure out how to turn this around. Let's figure out how to do what I'm supposed to do. Like, there is a reason for me to be here. I got to figure it out. I got to find my purpose and I got to commit to it. I made a promise, and that's been my promise ever since. The second part was when I was being considered for a role in a project that was shooting in LA.
Right back to Anita talking about that audition. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Dexcom. And here's what I have to say about Basal IQ, the Dexcom G6 tandem pump software program. We are doing less work for better results. Should I say that again? Less work, better results with diabetes. Benny liked seeing his CGM on his pump, but honestly, that was like a cool feature, right? He looked at his phone more. There is some secret sauce, though, in the Basal IQ that keeps Benny more steady. His time in range has increased significantly since we started Basal IQ. His A1Cs, you know I don't share exact numbers, but they have really improved since we've started using Basal IQ. Of course, individual results may vary. To learn more, just go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Dexcom logo. Now back to Nicole telling the story of what happened when she was called in for a sort of sexy audition.
And I was so excited about it. I was like Sharon Stone from Basic Instinct type of role. So I was like, oh my God, I would love to be that. Like, yes, give me. And like, they asked me to send photos and stuff like that. And I remember the writer or whatever, he was like, you know, the people financing the film wanted to know what that white thing was on your arm. And I didn't think anything of it. I mean, it's my insulin pump. I don't see it as often as apparently the rest of the world does, but they did. And so I just told him, I was like, oh, that's just my insulin pump. And he was like, you're what? I was like, type 1 diabetic, insulin dependent. That's basically my new pancreas. Oh, okay. And I remember he came back to me and he told me that the financiers said they do not see how someone who has to wear an insulin pump could portray the sexuality needed for the character.
Wow.
And I was like, excuse me?
Wow.
I was like, oh, you don't have to be sexy with this pump? All right, I'm going to show y'all. And that was the second part.
That's amazing. Wow. All right. So let's get back to the issue we started with. And I'll be honest with you, Anita, I get a little nervous talking about this because, let's be honest, I don't want to say anything wrong, right? I don't want to offend anybody. I don't want to be an idiot about this. I don't want to patronize you, but I want to have this discussion. So let me just put all of my insecurities out there and say, I really hope I don't step in it here, and push back at me if I do.
Okay.
But I get it, because we need to see people like us represented. And I'll be very open with you. I'm Jewish, and there's a lot of people in the diabetes community. There's a lot of autoimmune disease in the Jewish community, unfortunately. And so I've met a lot of people who are Jewish in the diabetes community. And it wasn't until people like you started pointing out, like, where are the people of color, that I thought, oh my gosh, I've been so comfortable in this community since day one. First of all, you know, everybody looks like me, but also I see my community, my small community, represented all over the place.
Yep.
There's so many questions to ask here, but I guess the first one is, and I always hate when we ask people of color to fix these problems, because that's not how it really needs to work. But I do want to ask you, what do we need to do? How do we start having these conversations? Because personally, I think people are embarrassed and they're worried they're going to say something stupid.
Well, I've always said it's kind of like, unfortunately for people of color, we have to do double the work. I've said to my type 1 community over and over again, the ignorance that exists about this disease is because we spend so much time trying to hide it. And I said, so we can't blame the world for not knowing when we do everything to quote unquote look normal. That's our fault. If we put the reality out there of what it is to live with this disease, to wake up, to do this, and do this, then the world can't say, well, I didn't know, because now we're the ones living with it. We're the only ones that can paint an accurate picture of this disease. So stop trying to hide it. Now, as someone of color, we have to work even harder now because we can't go into that. We're going to keep hiding it so we look normal and stuff like that. But now we also have to put it out there as a person of color. Like, hey, I am just like you guys. You know, my auntie had me come out and speak to a couple of schools that were primarily African-American based schools. And I got to educate them about the disease that they knew nothing, that there was even a difference between type 1 and type 2. But I got to go out there and talk to them about it. And it was nice of them to see someone of color actually speaking about it, someone of color who actually lives with this disease and still thriving and flourishing and doing what they want to do with their lives. So that's the one thing we have to do. We have to stop being quiet about it. And that was what prompted my post, because I was like, I know I can't be the only person of color in this community that is sitting up here like, hey, where we at? You know, I'm over here too, right? Like, I can't be the only one that's seeing this. And I was like, you know what? Let me go ahead and post this real quick and let me see what kind of feedback I'm going to get from this. And like, I'll admit, I was terrified to post that, but I was like, someone has to say it. Someone has to do it, because I can't be the only one who's not seeing myself being represented. And that's where it came from.
All right. So let me put another example out here for you. I haven't told this story because it probably doesn't make me look very good, but I don't care. We'll talk about it anyway.
Okay.
Every year at the Friends for Life conference, every July, for the last couple of years, I have done a live version of this podcast, and I select or I ask panelists to be on the show. And really the only requirements that the panelists need is they have to be there on Wednesday, because I can't pay people. I'm not paying for travel. They already have to be there. They have to be fun. They have to be up for a good time. It helps if I know them or I've talked to them before. But when I first put the first panel together, I said, okay, I can do anything I want with this. I really want to make sure there are women. I want to make sure that there are people of color. I want to make sure it's diverse as much as you can be with, 4 people and me.
Right.
But in my head, I'm thinking, well, how do I get there when I'm not sure who's going to be there, and I'm opening the book and I'm looking through the staff and I'm falling all over myself here, Anita, because basically I was saying, how do I find a person of color who's going to be at this conference on Wednesday without actually posting or saying, I need a black person for my panel on Wednesday. Who do you know? Who's going to be there? It just sounded horrible in my head. And luckily I found someone, and I know them, and then I did the same. I mean, I feel like I'm digging a hole here. But does that make sense to you? I mean, if I ran into that problem and I'm willing to try, I think it just stops people because they feel odd about the whole thing.
Well, I would say don't feel that way, because it's just like when I do, when casting calls come towards me and I'm trying to find a role and they say they need an African-American female. It's basically the same thing. You're looking for someone to fill a certain quota. And if you state it like that, I mean, trust me, you'll have people flooding your inbox 24/7. Like, I'm trying to represent all different ethnicities, all different races, to come and speak about being a type 1 diabetic. If you're interested, please. And everybody will send in info. And if you find yourself still short people of color, then you can edit the post. I'm still missing a couple of people of color. If you guys know anyone that you can tell me about and that you think would be interested, let me know. And I guarantee you'll be flooded. Everyone will send something. They'll tell you something. They'll say, hey, how you doing? Yeah. I could be there on Wednesday. What you need? Like, it won't be a problem. It's just a matter of not acknowledging it that makes us feel like, okay, I'm sure you see this. Like, you just went on that panel and you see all white people up there. Y'all not the only ones that get this disease, right? I'm just saying, Yeah,
right. But I think we're so reluctant to just have a plain old conversation. I got to tell you, Anita, it would never have occurred to me to say, I need more diversity on my panel.
Yep.
And can you help me out? Who do you know? That kind of thing. Because I think we do get so worried that we're going to say something wrong. Now, that's one part of it. Let's not pretend that there isn't systemic racism and there aren't systemic problems. I'm not trying to imply that. I'm not saying that everyone who's doing this just feels awkward about it. That would be a lot easier to fix. So, right. So what can we be doing? If we're going to different conventions, should we be looking ahead of time to see who's speaking? Should we be talking to the conference organizers? Just a quick email to say, look, this is something that's on my mind, or I saw an Instagram post. I really think that could help.
And that was the whole purpose. Like, that was why. And like, we started a group on Instagram where everyone started sharing the photo. I said, tag every company, everyone and everything that you've used, you work with as a type 1 and everything, and that has yet to represent us. Tag them, because they need to see it. They need to understand we're tired of this. Like, we're not invisible. Type 1 diabetes does not discriminate. They don't care who gets diagnosed with this disease or not. So why are we not as equally represented and as equally seen as everyone else? Because we're going through the same battles you guys are going through, but because you guys don't show us, unfortunately, a lot of people in the African American community don't even know about this disease or what to do about it. And that's where we have a problem.
Yeah. Let's talk about that for a moment, because I was a health reporter for a long time in local television. And, one of the things that they always talk about with type 2 diabetes is the African American community, because there's different prevalences of different diseases. And, diabetes certainly doesn't discriminate. But the way that, and I've talked to a few people of color who've said it's so hard to talk about type 1 in their communities because everybody just says, oh, you have the sugar. It's inevitable. Mm-hmm. I mean, I live in the South, so people really say that. It doesn't matter what your race is. But,
exactly.
Right. And they don't differentiate or understand. It's not something that can't be taught. It just seems like it's a community feeling. Have you run up against that too? I mean, we kind of danced around it, but is that something that you find when you're trying to educate people?
Well, most of the things I find is they say, oh, I didn't know there were different kinds.
Yeah.
And I say, well, yes, there are, because, you always get that one person. Well, if you eat right and everything and you lose some weight, exactly how much weight you want me to lose? I mean, I thought I was small enough as it is. Should I be like negative 50 pounds? Like, no, this is a totally different type of disease. Like, you need to understand that. That's one of the biggest things that I run into. But again, like I said, especially with type 2, it is most prominent, and the African American community knows so much about type 2, but they don't know anything about type 1. And when you're constantly seeing everyone with type 2 African American and everyone with type 1 being portrayed as white, you don't think about it. You're just like, oh, okay, so you must have type 2, so you must be in good shape and everything. No, I have type 1. Oh, you do? Really? Like, seriously? Yes, I have type 1. Why are you looking at me like I'm an anomaly? I guarantee you there's a lot of us that are of color that have type 1. Like, stop.
Wow. I wonder if it's going to take a celebrity, right? That's how so many people learn learn about diseases. People may not really understand type 1 fully, but they know Nick Jonas has it. Right?
Yep.
So they know
and
that.
That's all they know.
Right. That's about it. Not quite sure what that means. So I wonder in a way if that's something, that unfortunately is a way that many people in the greater community, not just in the diabetes communities, learn about it. So we'll come back to this, but let's talk a little bit about your acting career. Because you mentioned, losing that part because of your insulin pump. I assumed you persevered because I know that you are in the business. What is it like auditioning and acting with type 1?
You know what? This is actually kind of cool because I had a mom hit me up and say her daughter wanted to be an actress, and was there any advice I could give her daughter, because her daughter just refused to accept the disease and everything and all of that. And so, what could she do? And the first thing out of my mouth was, she has to accept this disease, like, period. Because the worst thing for you to do is to pretend you don't have it, end up on set, and something happens. Now you've put the production at risk, and now the production will probably blacklist you because of you not being honest and letting them know. So I'm like, it has nothing to do with you, but like, just like if I was at work, I'm going to let my job know I have type 1 because Lord forbid something happens there. I need them to know what to do. I need them to recognize, I need them to understand it. Anyone who doesn't understand it because I chose to hide it, that's my fault. So when I go on auditions, I do my best to make sure my insulin pump is in an area where it can be seen right away. Like, I'm not going to hide it under my shirts or anything. No, I will go in my audition. My pump will be right on my arm. It'll be on my calf. I'll be in a skirt. I'll have it on my boob and a low cut shirt there. So like, you cannot ignore the fact that my pump is saying, hey, how you doing? I'm auditioning too. You know, like, I'm making sure you're going to see it. And then if you ask the question, I'll be happy to answer it. But I'm not going to hide it. I'm not going to make it invisible, because then if I get that role and the production didn't know, I've just caused problems.
Yeah.
And that's the first thing I do.
Have you ever had a problem during an audition or right after with a low?
Yes, I've been on sets, and this sucked because it happened out of state, which is always scary. Because like, at least at home, you know, I'm with the comfort of my husband and my family and everybody that knows. But when I'm out of state, I'm by myself. And I remember so like, another thing about the misinformation about type 1 and type 2. So like, when I told production I had type 1 diabetes, I think all they heard was diabetes.
Right.
When I got to set, everything on set was sugar free, low carb. And I was, oh my God, I'm going to die. Like, I have no carbs here and I'm on the pump, and oh my God, they just tried to kill me. And so I was like, I can't tell you how terrifying it was walking on that set and seeing all of that. Now, big credit, because they were trying. I give them credit, but they didn't think and listen when I said type 1. So once I told them, they were like, oh my God, okay. And they sent someone out to go and get food and everything. But unfortunately, like, with all the acting and everything, my glucose levels just bottomed out. And next thing I know, I woke up in the hospital. And they were like, and like the head of the production company, he goes, I am so sorry, we messed this up. Oh my God. And I'm like sitting there and I'm coming out of it. I was like, oh crap, I screwed up, didn't I? I was like, how far behind? And they were like, no, don't worry about that. Don't. And I was like, no. How many scenes did we have to shoot before we were finished for the day? He goes, Anita, just worry about getting better. We'll worry about the rest of production. Aww. But I felt so bad, but that happened. Like, I've bottomed out on set. I asked the type 1 community, because I know sometimes when I hit my lows, sometimes I have like short-term memory loss. And it sucks, especially when I'm getting ready to film a scene that I had the dialogue down, but then I had a hypo and now I can't remember my lines. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm headed to set and I don't remember any of these lines. But wow. I'll get to set and I'll let production know, or the director. I'll be like, okay, my memory's coming back, but and they'll be like, no, Anita, we understand, you know, but it's just the fact of the matter, because I always kept them informed. And it's also because I'm so vocal on social media and everything. Like, there's no way you can't not cast me in something and not know I'm a type 1 diabetic. Like, you can't avoid that. Like, it's like right there. It's like, hey, that's that diabetic girl over there. You know, like, you can't ignore it because I make it so loud. So most of the time, productions, they're understanding. They know. They're like, no. Let us know how much time you have, and everything. But it's because I make sure they understand. You know, I do everything possible, so it's not a surprise for them. And if I run into those productions that are just like, oh, well, we don't want to deal with people like you, then I'm like, all right, peace out. I'll catch you later. There'll be another role where they'll be okay with it.
It's just got to be ridiculous. Everything you have to keep in mind with type 1 diabetes, you know, which I do not have. I help my son manage it, but that is hardly the same thing. And then the competitive world of acting and auditions and the pressure to get a role. Then you have a role and you're walking on eggshells because you want to keep it.
Yep.
Oh, it's just, why do you do it? Do you still love it?
Oh, yeah, I still do. Like, I love the acting and everything. I tell people, like, one of my favorite parts about acting, it's basically a test drive for a different personality, like a different life you may not get the opportunity to be exposed to, but through acting, you get to. And if there's something about that particular lifestyle or whatever, you can decide if you want to apply that to your life. Like, I think it's just awesome. It's so cool and it's so much fun to do. So yes, I still love it very much.
That's fantastic. Was there anything you wanted me to ask you about that we haven't gotten to yet?
Well, you said you've been to like lots of conferences. So have you ever, well, now I'm sure you'll probably do this, but have you ever thought about saying, hey, where's the diversity in, you know, representing everyone, every ethnicity, every background, so people can know that they're not the only ones doing this? Like, before you saw the post? Like, did that ever stick out in your mind?
You know, it did. It's interesting. I had a conversation earlier this year with comedian Chelsea Rice. He and I have kind of crossed paths a few times before, and he brought this up to me. So we did have a brief conversation on the podcast where I was probably just as awkward and, you know, tried not to say stupid things. But we did talk about it, and I have had it in the back of my mind. But I'll be honest with you, Anita, I didn't think it was up to me to say things. And I didn't think it was up to me when I'm invited to a conference to ask about it. And I think that has to change. As I'm talking to you, I don't know that I can change it, but why wouldn't I at least ask? You know, in this day and age, if I noticed that there were no women on the panels that I'm observing, right, I would definitely say something. That would strike me completely the wrong way.
Right.
So I don't know why it hasn't occurred to me to kind of ask guys, what are you thinking? And I'll do that from now on.
And like, that was one of the things that I remember I was trying to like steer clear from. I don't want it to just be, oh, so you guys aren't representing us, so now we're going to be all black people only. And I'm like, no, because that doesn't solve the problem. Basically, you guys are just telling us, hey, let's go back to segregation. No, that is not what we're trying to do here.
Yeah.
We're trying to be involved. So anyone that wants to help push this issue should be a part of the conversation. If you have white, black, Hispanic, Asians, and they all feel, oh, you're right, you know, we got to figure out how to get more people of color involved, then they should be invited to the table. It should not just be a table full of people of color, because, I mean, no disrespect to us, but it hasn't really accomplished anything yet. So we need the people that are out there and speaking and already doing what we would like to be invited to do. We need them to come to the table and be willing to talk to us about it. So we see how they stepped in and got their foot there. They need to come and be able to talk to us so we see how to move forward and get our feet there, you know? So that's what I want to do. I want to invite everybody to the table so we can all talk about it and hopefully together get everyone to realize, okay, yeah, we really need to make some changes with this.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to me and help, you know, work through the conversation with me and get the message out to me and to my listeners, Anita. I really appreciate it. I don't know that this conversation can change anything, but I know that when Benny was little, especially my son, I really wanted him to see role models, right? The thing that you said you didn't have. I wanted him to see within the community. Oh, you like football? You can play football. You know, you want to travel here? Look, this guy lives in Japan. You can travel the world. And if we don't reflect, if our leadership and our role models don't reflect the total community, then somebody's missing out. And I don't think the diabetes community overall is really like that. So I hope we can make a little bit of a difference here, or at least continue the conversation, Anita. So thank you so much.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
So what do you think? What should we do? I'm going to be taking a closer look at the places where I speak, the panels that I'm invited to, because like I said, if it was all women, I would definitely be speaking up. And that's certainly not a problem in our community. Thankfully, there are a lot of women in leadership positions and public speaking and that sort of thing. But I do think that it is important for people of color and all people to be represented, because we have to see ourselves represented in order to really feel like we're connected and feel like we're a part of this. Agree or disagree? Let me know. Let's throw this up in the Facebook group. You can certainly reach me through email or on Instagram, and we can talk about it there. But I like having these conversations. You know, as I mentioned, this isn't the first time. Talked to Chelsea Rice earlier this year. I ran that episode. I spoke to him last November, I want to say. But I will link that up in the show notes as well. And he had some good thoughts on getting it done. And the take here is recognizing it, talking about it, and taking action. So, you know, let's see where we go from here. All right, it is time for Tell Me Something Good. And I got a lot of submissions about ride and walk, about JDRF ride and walk, about milestones. So let's put those together and tell you all about them. Tell Me Something Good is brought to you by Real Good Foods. And I love the convenience of having them in my grocery store freezer. I mean, they are in Publix, they're in Harris Teeter, the two big grocery stores that are closest to my house. I And they're also in Walmart, which makes it so easy. Whether you're looking for their cauliflower crust pizza, for the poppers, the breakfast sandwiches, you can get the whole variety online on their website. They also have recipes. I mean, the food's prepared, but like cool ways to mix it up and prepare it differently. You can go to the website, or you can go to the grocery stores and Walmart and find it there. They have a where to buy tab right on the website. Makes it very easy. We love it. Low carb, high protein, real food. Check it out. You can go to my website, diabetes-connections.com, and click on the Real Good Foods logo. Bit of a theme in this week's Tell Me Something Good. I asked for submissions in the Facebook group, and I got a bunch of people. It must be ride and walk season. Got a bunch of people who wanted to talk about their accomplishments in those JDRF endeavors. I have to start with Elizabeth McCrary. She writes, on my 7th attempt, I finally completed all 100 miles in a JDRF ride to cure in Amelia Island on October 5th. While the emphasis is truly the mission, not the miles, it was a big accomplishment for this mom of a type 1 champion. I'll say, holy cow, 100 miles, Elizabeth, that is remarkable. Elizabeth is a tireless advocate and volunteer, and a great D-mom that I happen to know personally. Just amazing stuff. 100 miles is great. Beth wrote in, my daughter and I volunteered at the JDRF One Walk. I had a really fabulous interaction with a mom who was treating her daughters low. They are only 3 weeks post-diagnosis. After our conversation, she thanked me and said it was so good to meet me, and she smiled. I am glad I'm able to be a kind face who has been in those exact shoes. You know, Beth, it really is incredible when I see little kids, I mean like 2 years old, at a JDRF summit or a Friends for Life conference. It's like jumping through a time machine, right? Because that's how old Benny was when he was diagnosed. And so when you know you've been in that family's shoes and you needed you, right? You needed you to be there as you are for them now. I'm so glad you were able to be there too. Stacey Nagel writes, my son is working on becoming a CDE. Yes, that is fantastic. We need more of them. And Doug Hoy says 72 miles of the JDRF Ride to Cure Diabetes 100-mile goal. Only on the pump for a month, blood sugar was in range for 95% of the ride. That is remarkable. And then Elizabeth, from earlier, chimed in and commented to congratulate him and remind him that it took her 7 tries. And one more, Dennis Goldenson wrote in, I've just finished my training for the JDRF T1D Connections program. I will be a mentor for T1D individuals who are seeking help. I will not be giving professional or medical advice, but I'm sharing my experiences over the past 51 years of being a type 1. I'm looking forward to the challenge and having the opportunity to pay it forward like others have done for me. And Dennis was on the show before. We talked a lot about turning 65. Once you have lived with diabetes for a long time and then you turn 65 and you have to figure out how to pay for your health care, how the government pays for your health care, Medicare, and jumping through all those hoops. So he was a really valuable resource. And Dennis, I appreciate your time. Those are just some Tell Me Something Goods. I got a whole bunch more in the Facebook group, but those were all about walk and ride, and I thought I'd put them together. If you've got more, and I'll go back in the post, if you wrote something and it didn't get mentioned here, I will go back and read the rest next week. If you've got a Tell Me Something Good, please let me know. You can let me know on social media. You can message me. You can email me, Stacey@diabetes-connections.com. It's my favorite part of the show. It's where we just share the good news. It can be something small, something big, whatever makes you feel good, whatever you want to share. Tell me something good. We are getting closer to the release of The World's Worst Diabetes Mom. It'll be on Amazon November 3rd. In addition to the paperback, there is an ebook, an audiobook is coming, and pre-orders went out. So if you ordered a book over the summer at Friends for Life or online at any time, pretty much up to late last week, and you haven't received it yet, ping me, let me know, because they have gone out. We're getting some great responses online. A couple of people have texted or messaged me pictures of them reading the book, and I'm holding on to those. I'm going to start putting those out. If you've done that, a couple of people just took a picture of the book and said, look what I got. But take a picture of you or your mom, if you're an adult with type 1. Take a picture of you reading the book or pictured with the book in some way, or even with the bookmarks, because the pre-orders went out with some cute bookmarks. And, just let me know what you think of it. I'm excited to start getting some reviews. We should be getting some write-ups right about the time this episode is released by the Diabetes Media and some bloggers that got advanced copy. I'm so excited to put my baby out there in the world. Maura McCarthy, who, comes on the show with me once a month, she posted on Facebook that it was like having a baby. She's put out several books, and every single time it's like, my baby is out in the world. And it's so true, because you have this process for so long. And I lived with the book for so long, writing it, developing it before I even announced it, that now I feel like, are you going to like my baby? So we shall see. I'm very excited about it. I think the audiobook is going to be fun too. Coming up event-wise, Take Control of Your Diabetes in Charlotte is November 2nd. I'm going down to Florida, Macy's Believers, the weekend after that. We have a couple of local events for the book. There's a Meet the Author in the north part of Charlotte. There's another one in the south part of Charlotte. Both of those are benefit events for diabetes organizations as well. And then January, February, March, I think once a month next year, I'm doing a JDRF summit or another kind of diabetes event where I'll be speaking about the book and, hopefully meeting some of you, maybe citing some books. It would be exciting to do so. So the schedule is getting busy for 2020, but if you want me to come and speak or you want to know more about the book, shoot me a message, Stacey@diabetes-connections.com. Thank you, as always, to my editor, John Buchanan at Audio Editing Solutions. And thank you for listening. Like I said, after going to that She Podcasts conference, I am so energized and excited to continue to serve you, to bring you great news, information, and inspiration about type 1 diabetes. Let me know what you want to hear more of. Let me know what you want to hear less of, too. I'm happy to take constructive criticism. I'm Stacey Sims. I'll see you back here next week. Quick disclosure, at times I may mention Tandem Diabetes Care. However, I am not compensated by Tandem for my actions, and Tandem does not support or control this content. I have created the content, and it is based on my personal experiences and observations.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.